They're going to go Google. They're going to go to my site. They're going to look at my social media. They're going to look to see if are there any other third-party media. Like, your clients do the same thing. Like, they are checking on you. They are researching you. And I mean, one of the worst things is being invisible. Is like, if I don't, I mean, where does trust come from? Trust comes from, I see you, I learn from you, and I feel like I know you.
I am excited for this episode of the Business of Advice podcast. My good friend, Rory Vaden. Rory, it's great to have you on. I want to tell everyone the reason I'm so excited to have you on here is not only are you a best-selling author, Hall of Fame speaker, you're also the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, which is the driving force behind really some of the best-known personal brands that are out there in the world. People may not know that. So you've done a lot of different things, but we've had you speak here at Advisors Excel, not only to our team, our employees a couple times, but to our advisors now. Man, probably 2 or 3 times I think that you've been on our big stage. And I've just seen how much value you've been able to add. So excited to have you on the podcast. I know you're going to add a ton of value today. So welcome.
Yeah, buddy. It's so great to be here. I love you guys and what you're up to and your team. I just think you guys are awesome. But yeah, I guess I spoke once for the staff, twice at the World Series, 4 times this year for some of your new, advisors. And this is just great. I'm so glad you're finally doing a podcast. You guys have so much influence, and you have access to so many great people. Like this is gonna bring a lot of value to people.
I think you and I have only been talking about me doing this for about 1.5 years now. So we finally made the commitment. But, and this as well as anyone, you've helped a lot of people that are doing podcasts and creating their personal brand. It is a lot of work. A lot of work goes into it. So I wanted to make sure if we can do it well. But as you said, being able to get people like you on here is just going to add a ton of value to advisors for sure, which is, our really primary client. But I think anyone who's a business owner or entrepreneur is going to be able to pull a lot from this. So I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Yeah, well, it's funny, you talk about podcasting, and you mentioned the personal branding, and I mean, that is what we have been doing here the last few years, is really studying personal brands. And this is pre-released information, because we're just about to release something called the Trends in Personal Branding. It's a national research study that we conducted. We hired an independent research firm, and we went out and did this sampling, weighted to the U.S. Census Bureau, about how much is personal branding actually affecting business, and how is it affecting business. And one of the most salient points that came out of this study is that we asked this question directly: are you more likely to trust someone who has an established personal brand? And 74% of Americans say they are more likely to trust someone who has a personal brand. And if you just look at older millennials, so it's 85%. And older millennials are important because they are the decision makers for the next 20 years. And so personal branding has been this thing that's been viewed as sort of like vanity or fanfare or celebrity or, like lifestyle influencer kind of a thing. Yep. And we do see that in the data that baby boomers and to some extent Gen X place a much lower value on personal branding. But it tells us that personal branding is inherently the future. It is a huge part of how business is done, because to millennials and also to Gen Z, this is an integral part of the human experience. And that's what, I've spent my whole life studying influence. And now it's like that work is not just kind of an area of study. It's becoming like the tactical method of how business is done. And so it's fascinating and fun to see the impact of podcasts and the necessity of it. So that's, again, I'm really glad that you are doing this. It's a big step.
Well, and personal brand, I want to tie this into like financial advisors, which is who we work with, but
Yeah.
that's been and some of them, you see a mix of it, but I would say our most successful advisors have built a great personal brand more so than a business brand. You know them more than you know the company name. And I think even if you look in that space, you would have a Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman or Ken Fisher who manages $100 billion. So it's something that you see in the advisor space already. How, and maybe just kicking it off this way, what would you tell advisors about the importance of building a personal brand versus building a business brand, and how would you distinguish between those two?
Yeah, so you mentioned advisors, so let me give you another data point, because this is something that we looked at in the study. So we actually asked across industries, because when we started Brand Builders Group, we kind of launched with helping authors and speakers and coaches and consultants, because that's who we are.
Yep.
And then we noticed, gosh, there was this flood of people that were like entrepreneurs and in professional services, and even CEOs and executives who have these big companies. And it's like, whoa, didn't expect to see these people. And so we went out in the study and we actually asked by industry, or profession. And it turns out that one of the most conclusive parts of the study is that Americans believe it's extremely important for their top professional service providers to have an established personal brand. Doctors is the highest. 61% of Americans say it's important to them that their doctor is established as a personal brand, right? That they're a leader in their space, that they are someone who is trustworthy, who is respected among their colleagues and peers. And lawyers were 58%, and financial advisors were right behind them with 55%. So more than half of Americans expect their financial advisor to have a personal brand. That is really significant, especially when you cut the data. Gen Z is already, who isn't really dealing with financial advisors, right? They're too young for the most part. Yep. But 58% of Gen Z is already saying they would expect their financial advisor to have an established personal brand. And so even though it's not true as much with baby boomers, only 33% of baby boomers say it's important, right? So the number I gave you, 55%, is a blend of all the generations. Okay. And this is one of the reasons we hired the research firm is called the Center for Generational Kinetics. One of the reasons we hired them is because that's what they do, is they cut the data by generation, which allows you to basically predict the future, because you go, oh, when you segment this by age, it tells you what's happening. And it really is true that boomers don't really care. Like, they don't care. And Gen X kind of cares. But you start looking at millennials and Gen Z and you go, you better wake up quickly to the idea that this is not just about likes and comments and shares and views, that this is the future of the survival of these businesses. Now, one of the things that you asked, Cody, was about what they should do. Like, what
Yeah, let me maybe rephrase that. Like, what makes up a personal brand, right? It's not just the financial advisor's name. Like, what goes into actually building and making a personal brand? Maybe it's a better way to ask that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that, because here's the first thing I'll say is if you are a boomer or you are a Gen X, it's probably not what you think. When people hear when older generations typically hear the phrase, their mind goes to social media or like being a celebrity or a YouTuber or a speaker or something like that. Yep. And that's not really what it is. In fact, the way that we have come to broadly define personal branding is that personal branding is simply the digitization of reputation. The digitization of reputation. See, I actually think in this study, if we would have used the word reputation, we would have seen a flipped, an inverted response that baby boomers and Gen X would quickly say, oh yeah, reputation. Gosh, that's what matters. Super important. I get that. I understand the concept of reputation. But when you look at personal branding, they don't get that because they were raised to, and they were taught that, your reputation is your handshake. It's your word. They weren't taught that it's how vulnerable are you on video. But that is how it is today. It's the same handshake. It's the same authenticity and vulnerability, but it's at scale multiplied through media, social media, YouTube, podcasts, whatever, speaking. And so we try to help clients understand, even though we are, quote unquote, a personal brand strategy firm, we are one of the only ones who do this. There's a lot of social media firms. There's a lot of digital marketing firms. But there are very, very few people who look at the entire strategy for advancing a person's reputation and reach across a number of outlets, books and podcasts and stuff. And the moment we say reputation, they go, oh, I get it.
Yeah, that was great. I'll tell you, when we first met, and I don't know, we've known each other now for 6-7 years, probably at least.
Yeah.
But you were more in sales and leadership and maximizing time. So when you called me and said, hey, here's what we've got going, I think you and I talked about it. I'm like, man, there's not anyone doing that when you look at all the things. So maybe as a way to talk a little bit about what you all do, what's the process look like that you take clients through to get from this idea to actually building out the personal brand and all the components that go into that?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I'll tell you the whole secret in one sentence. And this is not a Rory Vaden quote. This is actually from one of my mentors younger in my career named Larry Winget. Have you guys had Larry ever speak at one of your events?
We haven't, but he's a character we should.
He's character. So anyways, he was teaching the class for speakers one day, not what he normally does. And I was listening to the recording of this, and this is what he said. He said, the goal is to find your uniqueness so that you can exploit it in the service of others. Find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. That's it. And the moment I heard Larry said that, I was like, boom, that is it. That is what it's all about. The trick is Larry wasn't in the business of helping people do that. And so when we sold our last company, which was a sales coaching company, and we wanted and needed to go into a different space doing something else, it was like, we should teach people how to do this, not in the hacky, slimy, kind of salesy, way of old, but in kind of like the classic reputation sense. And so what we do is we help people find their uniqueness. So we teach them how to do it. Larry was never in the business of teaching people how to do that. And that's the very first step. The very first step is to isolate and codify and get extremely clear about who you are and what is your uniqueness. What is different about you, or it's not even so much what is different about you than other people. It's what is your essence. And we really believe, another great quote, this is from another friend, another mentor, Sally Hogshead. Sally has this thing that she says, different is better than better. Different is better than better. And Sally's premise, she's somebody we actually helped with one of her book launches. She became a New York Times bestselling author, and she has a book called Fascinate. And she talks about how the key to becoming fascinating is to becoming more of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so we take people through this framework. We call it the brand DNA helix. It's these 6 questions that basically, and we can talk about them if you want to, but they're these 6 questions that you basically brainstorm the answers to all of these 6 questions, and you kind of dump them out on the table. And at the intersection of these 6 questions is where a person's uniqueness lives. And it is attached to who they are personally and what they have been through personally. And it's transformative, and it's clarifying and inspiring once you know what your uniqueness is. And yeah, so there's basically that's the first step, is to find your uniqueness. In our using our curriculum, we would say that's the first course. So we have 12 courses. That's the first of 12. After that, it basically becomes a process of extrapolating that uniqueness into a body of work, a philosophy, a set of beliefs and practices and principles, which is often reflected as a book or a course or a coaching program or a curriculum or just a framework for how you do even advising, right? It doesn't mean you have to become an author, but it's like, this is our process that we take people through that's unique to us. Then from there, we prepare that message for stage, the spoken word. And we very much believe that the fastest way to take someone from a stranger to a lifelong fan is a 1-hour live presentation. And that's been our experience. And so we know quite a lot about speaking from stage, and, you know, even things like the psychology of laughter and how to be funny and what makes people laugh. So we teach them that. Then we create a digital ecosystem around the person, something that we call a revenue engine. It is this automated ecosystem that goes out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pumps their advice, their education, their inspiration out into the universe, and pulls people back into their world, and then automatically nurtures these people to build trust without you physically being there, primarily through the use of several different types of video. And then from there, we teach people how to, sell and how to convert those leads. And then later in what we call phase 3, we teach people how to throw gasoline on the fire, which is basically through paid traffic, doing book launches, and building a sales force, which points more back to some of the stuff that we used to do. And then in phase 4, we teach, it's called 8-Figure Entrepreneur. So we basically teach the principles and practices of scaling a business, which for the most part, are kind of like general entrepreneurial success principles. But that's at a high level. Is one curriculum broken down into 4 phases, and each phase has 3 courses. So it's 12 courses altogether.
So one of the things, in transparency, we've had quite a few advisors now who have hired you and have gone through this process. And I think when some of them first hired you, they wanted to jump right to the marketing, right? I think they viewed this as like, okay, he's going to help us market our business better. And I think those first couple steps were eye-opening for them, right? They kind of felt like they knew who they were and what their brand was, but I think you really helped them refine it. But then let me ask a question about marketing, because I think anyone who's listening to this is probably going to have questions about it. What are some of the mediums? So if you're a financial advisor, most of the advisors we work with are working with people who are close to retirement or have transitioned into retirement. What are some of the strategies that you're seeing work really well? Like, where would you be spending your time? Maybe is a better way to ask that question, because I'm watching a lot of advisors waste time on platforms that I don't think is ever going to return anything for them. So any advice you would have for people on that, like where they should be spending their time?
Yeah, in some ways it's unique for everybody. It's actually a part of your uniqueness, and it's like it depends on the type of client you're going after. The other part of it is it's all about your frame of perspective. So just like what we said in the study, baby boomers and Gen Xers operate very differently from millennials and Gen Z. So I would agree that the client you land tomorrow is probably not, somebody who is on Clubhouse, right? Or Snapchat. But their son or daughter, who very likely is to inherit that wealth in the next 10 or 15 years, is on those platforms, right? Like, so it's kind of the Wayne Gretzky thing of going, the secret is I don't go where the puck is, I go where the puck is going. So the answer is there's many places that they are. The number one place the fastest place they are in the cell phone of your current customers. Like the fastest path to cash is through referrals of the people you know. Now, you might go, okay, well, what does that have to do with personal branding? It has everything to do with personal branding, because when that person, if you can get that person to refer you, like if Cody Foster sends, I don't know, whoever, like if you send John Maxwell and you say, hey, John, you should have Rory speak at your event. What do you think the first thing that John's going to do? It's going to count for a lot that you sent a personal thing. But John is, first of all, it's probably not going to be John. It's probably going to be his team. And what is this team going to do? They're going to go Google. They're going to go to my site. They're going to look at my social media. They're going to look to see are there any other third-party media. Like, your clients do the same thing. Like, they are checking on you. They are researching you. And I mean, one of the worst things is being invisible. Is like, if I don't, I mean, where does trust come from? Trust comes from, I see you, I learn from you, and I feel like I know you.
Yep.
So we're very much a fan still of referrals. And now here's so if, tactically speaking, if somebody needed to make money tomorrow, I would tell them, you need to learn how to sell first. Like, we would teach you how to comfortably ask for referrals, and we teach people how to do that. Like, that's going to be the fastest path. Like, sales is always the fastest path to cash. It's the shortest distance to revenue, but it's the least scalable. Right? I went door to door. Like, I went door to door for 5 summers. That's how I started. I knocked on doors 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. I could take someone from they've never seen my face to they're writing me a check in 20 minutes. I did that 20,000 times. Then I did corporate IT phone sales. Then when we launched our last company, what we would do is we would go speak for an hour to a small group, and then we would sell the group. Today, I speak to huge arenas and large webinars, which is more scalable. But it takes the thing that people also need to understand is that digital marketing, in some regards, building trust through automated mechanisms takes more time. Right? Somebody has to see more than one video of me online before they trust me. Yeah. Versus if I go knock on their door, they can trust me in 20 minutes. But if that's all I'm doing and that's all I'm building towards, I will never be able to outgrow that linear pace. And when you say that, your biggest advisors, like Joel is a great example, yep. Right? They're rainmakers because they're reaching millions of people. The percentages of marketing are much worse, are much lower than the percentages of selling. But the total net number is still much more, right? So it's like if I have a small percentage of a big pie, that will net me more customers than a big percentage of a small pie. So if I'm selling, I might sign up 1 out of every 3 people I talk to, but I can only talk to 3 people in a day. Mm-hmm. If I am using personal branding to cast my net, for me to get 1 client, I might need to have 1,000 see a video, or typically it'd be more like 100. A 1 to 3% conversion is usually pretty good. But the thing is I can not only have 100 watch that video, I can have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people watch that video without adding any time to my calendar and net far more clients for my firm. Part of this, of what I'm saying here too, is I'm going, look, I'm not the guy that says drop everything you're doing and go spend all day on social media. I think that's dumb. I don't think that's what will work. Now, long term, I think that will be a huge payoff. But you have to balance the runway here. And also you're balancing the generational trend. So you just have to you have to be planting seeds to stay far enough ahead of the curve so that when the millennials get here, which they're here, right? Like they are here, that you're there to capture them. And so it's, I used to tell, Jay Baer, right? You've had Jay Baer speak before.
Yeah, we have. Yep.
Yeah. So Jay's one of my best friends and another person that I've learned a ton from. I once shared with Jay Baer, I said, this was like shortly after I learned about digital marketing. I'd spent my whole life in sales. And then, I spent like 5 years like diving into digital marketing. And I remember one time I was lamenting to him and I said, gosh, Jay, I hate selling and I'm not sure marketing works. Like that was the discouragement, was like, I don't want to knock on doors anymore. And I don't want to ask for referrals. And I don't want to have to like drive in my car and go somewhere and do like a one-on-one presentation. And marketing just feels like this way to waste so much time. And the answer is that there is a blend of both here. But the cool thing too about marketing is that it can be scaled, it can be automated, it can be delegated, it can be systematized, it can be processed. It's a machine that you can build, and it's hard work. But once you build it, it is a snowball that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, Dave Ramsey's company is only getting bigger and bigger and bigger because every day there's more content out there being shared by more people and more testimonials, and it's this snowball, this upward spiral that you can't stop. But it takes a lot of energy in the beginning, and so you just need to like set your expectation. One, start now, and two, have proper expectations, which is hard because a lot of the people who do what we do, like literally they're doing webinars going like how to make 6 figures in 6 weeks, and like that ain't it. Like it's still reputation, and when it comes to building a reputation, there's no replacement for time.
There's a couple things you said there. You mentioned Joel, who's one of our top advisors, and he has built such a process that it's predictable, right? So as we'll probably talk a little bit about the take the stairs concept and the idea of the compounding effect of that. It does as it builds and it builds and it builds, and as your brand, or I like the way you say it much better, your reputation grows, the results grow significantly also. But you said something that just triggered a thought, and it's kind of fresh in mind coming off of this past year and COVID and everything that happened there. A lot of our advisors still to this day, but this is the curveball they got last year, they will do live events. So they may invite someone to a college, they may invite them to a dinner seminar, they're going to do an hour presentation. And at the end of that presentation, they will set an appointment, and those people will come in and within a few appointments become a client, right? It's a very fast sales process. A lot of them, I watch this, and entrepreneurs, but advisors, especially financial advisors, tend to see a shiny new object and want to jump towards it. So I think during COVID, digital marketing, Facebook ads, webinars became these shiny new objects, a little bit out of necessity. But one of the things I've heard from a lot of advisors is they're like, man, I'm just not converting like I was at my dinner seminars. And I've tried to tell them, and you said something there, like, you've got to put out a lot of content. You can't do one webinar or one Facebook ad and think the person's going to trust you enough. Is there any magic number there? Is there anything that you see, like the type of volume of content that you need to put out? Because I do think some people are worried about that. Like, how much content do we have to put out to make this work well?
Yeah. So, that's a good question about how much content. What we try to do is we try to create a manageable stream of consistent content. We use a technique called the content diamond, which we can talk about. I shared it at the World Series, a while ago at this point. But the key thing to realize is it's a lot of it. So part of it is building trust. Now, I love the dinner seminar, and I think of a webinar as it's the digitization of the dinner seminar, right? So to say they don't work is, number one, it's not true. Like, the data would prove that completely differently. To say that the conversion is less, though, I would say is absolutely true and something you need to plan for and expect. What you lose in conversion, you can gain in scale. Like what you lose in percentage conversion, though, you will gain in scale. But it's the same thing. It's come teach me for an hour. And I think a lot of it is that's part of the problem is like people do too much selling and not enough teaching. Now some people teach too much, but it's the idea of if I give you value for an hour, that's usually enough time to earn a good bit of trust, if it's really, really good. And so this is our whole model at Brand Builders Group. It's what we're doing right now. We're literally doing this right now. I am here delivering as much value as I can pack into a short amount of time. And at the end of this, I will offer people a chance to do a free call with our team. Now, the call is educational. We teach some things. But at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out, is this person a match for what we do? And there will be some people who listen to this that will take us up on that. And an hour will be enough for them. There will be lots of other people who listen and go, wow, that was good, and they'll forget my name this time. But then they'll see me next week, or they'll see me in Success Magazine, or they'll see me somewhere else. And so everybody wants to know what is the magic mix of content, like the right amount of content to put out, how long, and all that sort of stuff. But in reality, it has less to do with you, and it has more to do with the timing of what's going on in the life of your prospect. We had a great example of this recently. So we had a Brand Builders Group event. So our events are only open to our coaching clients. So they're closed events. So part of when people are in coaching with us, it includes that they come to a certain number of events. And so we had an event, and this question came up. And I asked the room spontaneously. I had no idea what was going to happen. I said, who here has known about me for the longest period of time, and this is the first time you have bought? And there was a woman there's only like 20 people in this group. And there's a woman who raises her hand and she says, I saw you speak 5.5 years ago. I have followed you on social. I've listened to you on podcasts. I've heard you on other people's podcasts. And for some reason, I finally, reached out and signed up. And I said, great. And then I said, who here feels like you may have just heard about me recently? And a woman raises her hand and she says, Rory, I heard you on a podcast 5 days ago. I did a free call. I signed up yesterday, and now I am here. I've been attempting to do the same thing the whole time. Put out as much valuable content for free. It's about the timing. The key is when they're ready, I have to have systems in place that are set up to catch them.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's just this shotgun approach. And the tools of the day exist, are affordable and are reasonable to set up to build this ecosystem where we're swirling around people. We're allowing them to raise their own hand when they're ready and to let the system catch them, rather than just I'm knocking on a door, going door to door, hoping to catch the right person at the right time. Now, because of the law of averages, I'll still catch people, but I will annoy the vast majority of people. The difference is the automated system, I won't annoy anybody. Yeah. People will only love me. They will only get value. Because if they don't, they'll just simply tune out. They'll stop listening. They'll hit pause, right? They'll unsubscribe. But the people who are kind of interested will hang around, and they will nurture. So it's more about having consistent value and being there when they're ready to catch you. And so our goal is to get people to subscribe to some regular form of content, right? I mean, if you look at you as an example, Cody, the best thing ever would be that a top independent advisor who is not yet a part of Advisors Excel starts listening to this. Yep. And they hear you interview all the people you bring on, me and Michael Hyatt and all these people, and then all your top advisors, right? You've got so many different people that are coming on. And eventually they go, and this is something that we call the rule of 10. So the rule of 10 is, I want to have provided 10 times the amount of value for free before I ask someone to make their first purchase. So if I'm going to ask someone, let's just use easy numbers. Let's just say if I'm going to ask someone to spend 10 grand, that I will have provided them $100,000 of value, that they feel like they've gotten enough insight or motivation or paradigm shifting, whatever, or just it's relevant because of what's going on in their life, that it's almost like what a lot of people do wrong with content marketing is they tease, and it's like, okay, I'll tease you, and then if you pay me, I'll give you the good stuff. You want to flip that. You want to give them so much to where it's almost like they feel like they owe you, because they're going, oh my gosh, like I've learned so much. And for financial advisors, this is easy because you really shouldn't be selling them other stuff. And in some regulations and stuff, compliance, you can't sell them other stuff. You sell them your service. So you just go out and teach and pour value and educate and encourage and inspire, and you share messages of hope and and then people will raise their hand, and when they're ready, who are they gonna invest with? The guy they've just got a random flyer from in the mail, or the person that they've been watching video clips helping them save money for retirement and understand the definitions, and they've been following them for years, just learning basic financial principles and acumen. You're going to go with the person that you trust. And it's ultimately the reason why I shared that very opening statistic, that 67% of Americans say they are more likely to trust somebody with an established personal brand, is because that's what we're talking about here. This is a game of trust. Like when we say reputation, that's just another word. It's another word for trust. Sorry, I misquoted the statistic. 74% of Americans are more likely to trust somebody with an established personal brand. That number that I just threw out here, the 67%, so I haven't shared this statistic yet. That number I just threw out, 67% of Americans say they're willing to spend more money on products and services from the companies of founders who have personal brands that align with their personal values. So 74% of people just say, I'm more like, I trust you if you have a brand. But 67% say, I will spend more money with your firm if I trust you as the founder. Like, that is massive. And if you look at older millennials, it's 80%.
Wow. Not
67. It's huge.
Glad I'm finally doing this podcast then. Hopefully we can build that trust. But there was something you said in there. It's this idea of consistency. One of the things that we did here as an organization, this is probably 3 years ago now, we sent a couple team members out to our advisors' live events that they were hosting. And then we stuck around after, and we asked everyone that had attended that night. These were all prospective clients, right? They weren't clients yet. So this was
like a dinner seminar.
Exactly. And we stuck around and we said, hey, if you'll do this live survey, fill these things out for us, we'll give you a gift card or something. We surveyed over 3,000 live attendees that had come to a financial advisor's, marketing seminar. And what was fascinating is one of the questions we asked is, if you set an appointment with this advisor, why did you set the appointment? And it was, I don't remember the exact number. It was north of 60%. It was timing. Like they were getting ready to retire, or someone had just had a health scare, or something had happened. So one of the things we talk about all the time is this idea of being persistently valuable, because so many decisions are made off of timing. So if you're the person they think of when that, major life event happens, that says like, we need to go see a financial advisor. That's how you're going to stay in front of them. So that's good. Hey, let me, because I know we've got a hard stop, and there's a couple other topics that I want to make sure we talk about. I know building a brand is so big in what you're doing now, but
let me throw this out too. Yeah. So before we change directions, so if you're looking for ideas on like tactically how to find your uniqueness, build this automated ecosystem, if you go to freebrandcall.com/RV, freebrandcall.com/RV, you can request a free call with our team, right? And so we will talk to you. We'll want to hear your story, like hear about your team size, what you're up to, like how far along are you. We work with everyone from massive international celebrities all the way to people that are like just barely beginning and, I have an idea for this thing. We don't do branding for companies, though. We only do personal brands. So we take a personality, a face, a CEO or a founder or an advisor, and we create a strategy for that person to grow their reputation. But if you want to talk, go to freebrandcall.com/RV.
I would encourage everyone to do that. One of the things that I love, just having some advisors that have gone through it, there's plenty of them that you've said like, hey, I'm not sure we're a great fit. I'm not sure this is the right time too. So it's not just a sales call, which is super valuable. So here's what I do want to talk about. You have a big background in sales and building a sales organization. As some of our advisors scale their business, they have to figure out ways then to duplicate themselves. And you've had some experience in building and scaling a sales organization. What are the keys that you've seen to be able to build that organization and duplicate yourself?
Yeah, well, and you're talking about specifically like building up a sales team?
Yeah, like, so you're not the only advisor seeing people. Like you use Joel as an example, right? So Joel no longer meets with new clients. He has a team of advisors that meet with those clients instead. What are the keys to building that? All
right. So I'm going to give you the philosophy first, and then we can dive down and I'll give you like the 9 tactical applications, the 9 tactical applications of this. Okay.
Okay.
So in order to share with you the philosophy, I need to tell you a story about. This comes out of my second book, Procrastinate on Purpose, 5 Permissions to Multiply Time. And this is funny because I know you know Darren Hardy pretty well, right?
Yep.
So this is a true story about me. I tell people I was sitting with my friend Darren. Darren Hardy is who this story is actually about. So I'm sitting with Darren Hardy at this Starbucks in Cardiff by the Sea, which is where he lived at the time. I don't know if he still lives there, but it's this like, ritzy Southern California space. And we're just catching up. This is several years ago. It's like 2012. I was on my book tour for my first book. So I'm sitting with Darren, and out of the corner of my eye, I notice a Bentley in the drive-thru. And Bentleys are my favorite car, right? I love Bentleys. And so I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And then behind it, there's like a Maserati. And I was going, wow, you really don't see that very often. And then sure enough, I look over in the parking lot and it's like Ferrari, Rolls Royce, Lamborghini. And it dawns on me, Cody, that I'm in a very different neighborhood than the trailer park I grew up in, right? Yeah. Like, so I asked Darren this question. I said, Darren, what do you think is the greatest difference between rich people and everybody else? And what he told me changed my life, because he said, well, Rory, there's basically 3 different types of people in the world as it relates to money. And he said, if we could go into this Starbucks, I could tell you which of these people are already rich or destined to be rich just by which of the 3 types of thinking they deploy. He said, for example, most people, not most people, he said the first type of person, which is representative of lower middle class thinking, walks into Starbucks and they ask themselves 2 questions. The first is, do I want this $5 coffee? If the answer is yes, their second question is, what do I have to do to get the coffee? They are completely governed by short-term emotional impulse. They'll beg for the coffee, they'll steal it, they'll put the stupid coffee on a credit card. Like, all that matters is what I want here and now. But that's not most people. Most people, which is the middle class, they ask themselves, do I have $5? And I remember telling to him, I said to Darren, well, what's wrong with that question? He said, there's nothing wrong with that question. It's just not how rich people think. He said, a wealthy person knows that if I spend $5 on this coffee, that's $5 I'm not spending on something else. I said, you're talking about opportunity cost. He goes, yes, but there's a lot more to it than that. Because a wealthy person knows that if I spend $5 on this coffee, that because of compounding interest, it will grow to be worth more than $5. For example, $5, this is rough math, $5 invested at like 8% for 30 years would grow to be worth around $50. $5 for 30 years at 8% is around $50. And he says, so a wealthy person's second question is not, what do I have to do to get this coffee? It is also not, do I have $5? Their question is this $5 coffee worth $50 to me 30 years from now? Which was crazy. Now, I know you all understand compounding interest, right? Like if you're here listening, you probably understand it. And you're going, okay, what does that have to do with this? Yeah, we hope we do. Scaling a sales team. Well, here's why. Because it took me years to realize this, years later after this conversation. It dawned on me that automation is to your time exactly what compounding interest is to your money. Automation is to your time what compounding interest is to your money. Just like compounding interest takes money and turns it into more money, automation takes time and it turns it into more time. So even though a webinar will never convert as well as a dinner seminar, it's still worth it because over time you can have a limitless number of people go through there. It can be running while you're asleep, automating trust. Well, what that teaches us is that anything you create a process for today saves you time tomorrow. And that's how you multiply time, which is what my second book was all about, is how do you multiply time? It's simple. And there's a TED Talk on this, which is free if you can go watch the TED Talk. But the premise of how do you multiply time is you spend time on things today that create more time tomorrow. You have to give yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that create more time in the future. Just like investing. The way that wealthy people think about money is the exact same way that multipliers think about time. You have to give up time in the short term to build something that you don't have time for. But when you make what we call the significance calculation and you think longer term, by giving yourself permission to invest the time building that thing, then every day thereafter, the process is doing the thing for you instead of you, just like compounding interest is automation. So this applies to digital marketing. It also applies to sales. So that's a long answer, a long way of coming back to simple. How do you scale a sales team? Simple. Process, systems. It is setting up processes and systems that you don't have time to set up today. You have to purposefully, deliberately, intentionally, consciously forego spending your time on something else so that you can invest it into building something, a system, specifically these, we call them the 9 S's, these 9 systems that every single sales team needs if you want to scale your sales. Each of these things takes time. It's time you will tell yourself, I don't have. And it is true that you don't have time to do these things, but only if you evaluate time through the lens of what we call the urgency perspective, which is one day. But if you make what we call the significance perspective, which is thinking about tomorrow and the next day and the next day, then you will realize that, oh, even though it costs me time today, that this will multiply my time in the future. Just like with money, going, I don't have extra money laying around to invest, but by not going on that vacation, I will instead take that money that I would have used for vacation and I will invest it. I'm giving up something in the short term, investing in the long term. So, that is the reason I spend so much time on that, Cody, is because most people know the answer to the question you asked. How do you scale a sales team? They know they have to build all the same processes. They have to build processes for people to follow that are the same sales processes that they follow intuitively in their head. They need to systematize it, codify it, train it, deploy it, hold people accountable to it. They already know intuitively what to do. Now I'll tell you the 9 S's.
Yep.
But in almost every case where we see paradigm shifts, like when we see massive breakthroughs, it's not from teaching somebody what to do. It's teaching them how to think. The next level of results always requires the next level of thinking. And this is something that we address head on in Procrastinate on Purpose, because we teach people how to make the significance calculation. It's breaking outside of the paradigm of just saying, what's the most important thing I have to do today? Multipliers don't ask that question. They don't say, what's the most important thing I have to do today? Multipliers say, what are the things that I can do today that create more time tomorrow? And that causes them to evaluate their priorities different from even people who would normally be considered very high performers. But the top 1% is totally different. So it's the thinking that really matters here. So I'll give you want me to just rip through the 9 S's?
Yeah, and before you do them real quick, it's just because I want to set the stage for you, because these 9 S's are going to set this up. One of the things that I see from so many advisors is they're trying to build or scale an organization. They may start getting really good. We help them figure out how they generate more leads. Most of them have never taken the time to really structure and systematize their sales process.
Yes.
They get by on their personality and their sales ability. So when they try and bring on that next associate advisor and they hand leads off to them, they get frustrated because they're not as good. So that's one big mistake I see. The second mistake I see or hear is they'll get frustrated because they'll say like, well, I close 60% of the new leads we see, and this advisor's only closing 40% of the leads, so I would be better off. And I remember Joel saying this really clearly one time. Yeah, but if I have 5 guys closing 40% and I can generate enough leads, like that, it's going to dramatically generate more business and revenue for the firm. So as I set those up, those are 2 of the most common things. Maybe just add, as you go through these 9 S's, like how that kind of fits in there.
Yeah, it totally fits in there. Related to time. So in Procrastinate on Purpose, the whole framework is something called the focus funnel. It's eliminate, automate, delegate, concentrate, and procrastinate. And in the delegate section, this applies not only to sales but to like hiring assistants and bringing up people. And this is the mental block right here. Like, you got to where you are by being a perfectionist. Like you got to be where you are as an achiever by being great, by doing things perfectly, like over delivering. But what got you here as a performer will not get you there as a leader. Most of the world are not A students. They are B and C students. So if you are going to leverage and benefit from the help of other people, you have to give yourself the permission of imperfection. You have to, and this is what's so difficult, because it is literally 180 degrees against the philosophy of how we got to become who we are.
What makes you great, yeah.
And you have to realize, so like one of the people we profiled in Procrastinate on Purpose, one of the multipliers, they said it like this, which is so elegant. They said, the only way you can become a multiplier is when you realize that 80% done right by someone else is always better than 100% done right by you. You got to be able to accept B plus work. Otherwise, you'll never scale. Like, you don't have to. You just have to if you want to scale. Andy Stanley has one of my favorite leadership quotes of all time is from Andy Stanley on this. He says, look, leadership is not about getting things done right. leadership is about getting things done through other people. And people are imperfect. Like, and Andy didn't say it this way, but I think of it as like going, it's about making beautiful things through imperfect people. Like, that's what leadership is, and pardon the scripture reference, but look at Jesus's disciples. It's 12 bums, basically 12 bums off the street that didn't know what they were like. These were social outcasts, right? And whether or not you believe in Jesus as a Messiah, but like if you just go, Jesus was a historical person who lived, and he has more followers than any other person or brand in the world today. Like, there are more followers of him, and it started with 12 idiot disciples who had no clue or business teaching anything or spreading anything about anything. Like, they had no credibility. So if you want to accomplish great things, you have to be able to do it with imperfect people.
Yeah.
And it's so hard, because if you are an achiever, what got you here as an achiever won't get you there as a leader.
That's good. Okay, the 9 S's, because I know we're starting to get tight on time.
Okay, so here they are. So these are, by the way, so I mentioned we have 12 courses. So this is one of our courses. It's a phase 4 course. It's called Scale Your Sales. So that's where this comes from. So I'm giving you the high-level overview of that entire course. Okay, so the first S is stages. So it starts by mapping out what are your sales stages. Okay, you have to think through your process of how we move somebody. Selling is a series of stoplights. And you have to think about what are each of the stoplights. So you have to, it starts with understanding your strategy, which is, these are the stages. Then you have to come up with scorecard. You have to set, these are the metrics, the activities, these are the trackers, these are the KPIs, right? And you need to have a scorecard that each of your salespeople fill out on a regular basis. If it's technology, cool. It can be a friggin' spreadsheet. It can be a sticky note. But someone has to manage the daily activity of salespeople. Salespeople are no good on their own, right? Like, not scalable ones.
Yep. The
top producers will be, but you can't depend on top producers to scale your business. They're too hard to find, and they're volatile, and they leave you for more money, and they're so good. There's all sorts of problems with top producers. What you want to build is a scalable thing. You need scorecard. Third is you need standards. So, standards are very simple. These are the standard goals. These are the quotas. These are the expectations. These are the awards. These are the incentives. And then this is, if you get off track, here is increasingly severe consequences that ultimately lead to your dismissal. Fourth is a schedule. You need to tell salespeople how they will spend their time. Like, if you're going to truly scale a sales team, it's going to be people that you tell them, this is what you do between these hours and this hours. So you got to have a schedule. Then, salary, which specifically I would say it doesn't have to be salary. Very often it's more incentive based, but you need to show them the long-term vision. You need to create a tool that shows them where they can mess with assumptions and say, okay, if I generate this many leads at this closing percentage and I sell this average price point, it'll yield this much in commission. If I do it, and it's got to be a tool that they can plug in their own assumptions, because when you do it, it has no meaning. When they do it, they go, ooh, that's how I can make $200,000. Like, I'll go do it. So give them a tool that maps it out month by month. Next is software. You got to have a CRM. You got to have reporting. Like, a scalable sales force has to have total transparency. Yep. We cannot scale something based on, what John says his pipeline is. Like, that is not scalable. It's got to be, you got to take the time to build the CRM, build the reporting, and it's built into the software. 7 is sourcing. This is probably the biggest thing you need to figure out, is how to source great salespeople. In other words, you have to build a recruiting process. You got to have, you got to know this is the job description. These are the places that we post. We need to know how many resumes do we need to post on average to get a certain number of interviews. It's just like building a sales pipeline. It's a recruiting pipeline. People fall victim and beholden. They hang on to salespeople for way too long because they're afraid they can't replace the person.
Yep. That's
not a place of power. What gets you out of that weakness is to just go, I've got a strong system to go find good salespeople. And it's simple: a job description, a pay plan, a few places that you post, a set of screening questions, and a training process. Which is number 8 is support. Number 8 is support. You got to have training. Sales training is not, we spent a day together. And it's like, what is the best type of sales training? All types of sales training. They need to shadow people. They need weekly one-on-one meetings. They need team meetings. They need to go to conferences. They need to read books. They need to watch videos. Salespeople get beat up more than anybody else. Like, they just get beat up. Constant reinforcement. And then number 9 is scripts. You got to have scripts, at least talking points, and they'll push back on it, and that's fine. But you got to have a script or at least some detailed talking points. Why? Because if you hire a great salesperson with the gift of gab, it's not scalable. Like, we got to have something that's scalable. It's got to be repeatable, documented. And so we need scripts. And then, related to scripts is give them affirmations as part of their scripts, like not just what to say to sell, but like you give them little nuggets on how to describe your products, and then also affirmations for things they should tell themselves, like when they deal with rejection and frustration, that kind of stuff. So anyways, there's the 9 S's of scaling your sales team, Cody.
Yeah, that was great. So much value there. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, we're tight on time. I always want to end these with asking, it's what I say, questions that I would want to ask another successful entrepreneur. So kind of lightning round. So we'll do them quick, okay?
All right, I'm ready.
Last year was a crazy year, I think, as a leader. A lot of lessons that were probably learned. But as you look back at 2020, what was the one lesson that you will carry forward for the rest of your career or life?
People are insanely adaptable when they're forced to be.
Very good. What was the one thing that you feel you did to graduate from being very good, a very good entrepreneur, very good business owner, to being a great entrepreneur?
Easy. Granted myself the permission of imperfection.
Perfect. What are you doing this year to drive your own personal growth? Anything new or exciting?
I wouldn't say it's new. It's I'm in masterminds. I have mentors. I read books. I listen to podcasts. So I wouldn't say there's anything super innovative, although one thing that is new is I got an infrared sauna, and I do that every morning. So it's the same morning routine I've always done, except I do it in the infrared sauna. So I'm burning calories while I'm doing my normal morning routine.
Nice. I like it. What is the one book that you have recommended the most to other entrepreneurs?
Ooh.
Can't be one of yours.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you take out the Bible, which would be my number 1, and if you take out mine, which legitimately would be on the list, for other entrepreneurs and business owners, I'm going to have to go with 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Pat Lencioni.
Great one. Final question. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
That's a good one. I mean, it's funny. The thing that immediately pops into my head is the one that I shared from Larry Winget. Find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. Like, all of us are most powerfully positioned to serve the person that we once were. And so if you can just dial in on that, man, it's you're living into your purpose.
Yeah, that was great. I wrote that down. The thing I love about this podcast, I take so many notes, that it's super valuable for me, which I know means it's going to be valuable to everybody else. So I appreciate you, my friend, taking the time to do this. Tell everyone just before we end how they can do the free call, but other ways that they can stay connected with you.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is if you want to stay connected, go to freebrandcall.com/RV. If you got other questions for me specifically, usually the best place to hit me is on Instagram, just to leave a comment or a DM. That's where I am actively responding directly. Yep, that's
great.
it.
And you do have a great podcast, so look that up too. Very enjoyable. So if you enjoyed this episode of the Business of Advice podcast, hit subscribe, join us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, so you can be the first to know about great new episodes with people like Rory. And please, if you found this conversation valuable, I think, there's so much content out there. Go leave a review so other people know that this is worth their time also. Rory, always great to catch up, buddy. I appreciate so much great value that you're sharing, and appreciate the way that you do it and what you stand for.
Well, likewise, buddy. I love you guys and believe in you. I just think you're one of the coolest companies in America, and I'm so excited about the contribution you make to advisors and the contribution they in turn make to their clients. So keep it going, and we'll wish you the best.
Thank you.